Hi, today I'd like to share with you a positional masterpiece of Garry Kasparov. He played this Blitz game in St. Louis around a year ago against one of the top grandmasters, Dominguez. Dominguez is white, Kasparov is black, and they started with e4, pawn to c5. By the way, Kasparov demonstrated really well how to play the Sicilian defense, a lot of the typical ideas, so this game is not only beautiful but also is highly instructive. White played knight f3, d6. Kasparov is known as one of the greatest experts in the Najdorf variation of the Sicilian defense, which you can see right now on the board, and it is actually considered to be one of the strongest opening choices for black. White plays h3, pawn to e6, g4, known as advanced fianchetto. White is preparing to develop his bishop, and at the same time he's ready to possibly attack black on the king side with pawn to g5, which is prevented by Kasparov, who played pawn to h6. White followed up with bishop g2, and here comes the first surprising but a common idea. Kasparov played a very sudden move, pawn to g5. It may be not a very sudden thing for you if you play Sicilian defense yourself and if you're well familiar with the common ideas, but otherwise it would seem like something really strange. Like black is voluntarily weakening his king side, where we might expect that black would want to castle, and instead he's just weakening his king side and made this little bit weird looking pawn move. What is the point? The point being, black is securing the e5 square for his knight in the future. And the purpose of the g5 move is that it prevents white's pawn from moving to f4 and taking control of that key square e5. Let's move on and we'll see why it is so critical for black to take control over this critical square e5. White played bishop e3, he simply continues developing his pieces. Black plays knight to d7, the knight is already aiming at that key square e5, and he's landing the knight there right on the next move, knight to e5. White castled, and black made another a little bit shocking move, knight f to d7. Quite often people ask me, Igor, why is it that top grandmasters often violate all the common rules that are taught in chess manuals? And I think this game is a perfect example. If you look at the white side, he developed all his pieces, castled, and so to speak played following all the classical rules. While if you look at black, you may notice that he just made that weird pawn move to g5 and jumped around with his knights, ignoring development of all of his other pieces. And therefore it may look like Kasparov violates all the opening rules and does something totally different instead. So what is the point? Is it that Kasparov forgot all the classical chess rules after his retirement from chess? Of course not. He knows the rules very, very well, but in this case he's following more advanced idea. And the idea is that if you have a strong knight, like in the current position that knight on e5, then it serves kinda as a shield. This knight controls so many squares that it makes it really difficult for white to make any progress, any advancement, and not be attacked by that knight. So therefore, this is like a key to the black's fortress, and as long as black can keep the knight there on e5, controlling so many squares around, he may feel safe in his position. And for that exact reason, black delayed temporarily development of his other pieces. Alright, let's see how that works in the following course of the game. White played h4. He wants to undermine the black's pawn on g5 and again, hopefully play f4 and kick away the black's knight from e5. But of course, Kasparov doesn't want this to happen, so he plays rook g8, protecting the pawn on g5. White trades off the pawns. He plays king b1. At this point, we can already see that white is somewhat not sure what to do here. He's like in shortage of the right plan. And black plays pawn to b5. That's another really common idea for black that I would like you to remember. Again, this is advanced fianchetto, and it's a multifunctional move. So with playing b5, first of all, black enables the development of his light-scored bishop to the long diagonal, where it's going to be really active, attacking white's center. Secondly, the pawn is ready to go forward to b4 and kick away the white's knight from c3. And finally, the pawn from b5 securing the c4 square, and therefore black always can jump there with his knight. Therefore, you can see this one pawn move serves multiple purposes, and that is why it is so good. And if you can make this kind of advanced fianchetto in Sicilian defense, it is almost always a good idea. Let's go ahead. White played a3, preventing black's pawn from moving forward. Black played bishop b7, just as we discussed. White played bishop c1. Oh, once again, he's not really sure what to do. And here Kasparov played rook to c8. It is a very common move in the Sicilian defense, but I would like you to pay attention to it, because very often in almost all of the openings, it is really difficult for black to bring his queenside rook into play quickly. And sometimes in the games of club level players, you may even notice that they totally forget to bring this rook into play till a very late stage of the game. One of the advantages of Sicilian defense and playing c5 on the first move is that oftentimes it provides you with this semi-open c-file for your rook, and you really gotta take advantage of this by playing your rook to c8. Rook is a very powerful piece, and if you can bring it into play quickly, this will definitely help you a lot, and this is what Kasparov does here. Right now, by the way, he's already somewhat threatening to sacrifice the exchange, to play rook takes c3, which would destroy the position around the white's king. White was scared of that, and he played rook to h3 to protect his knight on c3. And here Kasparov played knight g6. The purpose is he's vacating the e5 square for another knight from d7, while the g6 knight is ready to go on f4 anytime in the future. So he further increases the activity of his pieces. White played bishop h1, black continued with knight to e5, white played rook g3, black plays bishop e7. It is also very instructive to notice how Kasparov improves the position of every his piece methodically. From move to move, he's always finding the way to make one of his pieces a little bit more active than it was before. White played knight e2, here comes rook h8, the rook goes to an open file. White plays rook c3, he tries to neutralize black's pressure on the queen side, and he succeeds in this. However, in the meantime, black of course increased the activity of many other his pieces. Here Dominguez played bishop g2, and here there is another instructive moment. Usually when you attack, you try to avoid trading off the pieces, and in particular trading off the queens. However, it is not always the correct strategy, because when you exchange opponent's defenders, it helps your attack. With that in mind, Kasparov played queen to c4, and the purpose is he wants to trade off the queen, which is protecting the pawn on g4. Therefore, after the exchange of queens, which actually happened, queen takes and pawn takes, you can see that the pawn on g4 is currently under the attack. So that's how trading off the queens helped black to continue attacking. And by the way, this was a blitz game, and Kasparov had only 5 minutes for the entire game, which means that he knows the patterns really well, and that's how he can find the right moves so quickly and easily. And I hope that after watching this game you can also remember a couple of typical ideas for the Sicilian defense, so that you can utilize them as well while you're playing your games. Alright, white played pawn to f3, rook h2, attacking the bishop. White played back, bishop f1, and here comes another knight, and goes to f4. Once again, you may pay attention to this fact how black is always finding the way to improve one or the other piece in his position. White played bishop a3, and here black continued the same strategy of improving every piece that he has, and he played bishop d8, and from there the bishop is ready to go forward either to b6 or to a5 and keep putting more and more pressure on the white's position. White played rook d2. He hopes to neutralize the pressure by trading off the pieces, but as we discussed, it does not always help. Black traded off and played bishop b6, attacking the knight on d4, while the knight cannot go away really, because it has to protect the pawn on f3, which is attacked by black's knight from e5. White traded off another knight. He desperately tries to neutralize black's pressure and plays knight e2, protecting the knight on d4. And black continues, he plays pawn to d5. This is also an indirect attack of the pawn on f3, so black wants to bring his light-scored bishop into play and continue attacking white pawns. White took the pawn, black recaptured with the bishop, once again attacking the pawn on f3. Currently it's attacked with the black's both minor pieces, the knight and the bishop. White played bishop g2, trying to protect it, but there comes knight takes g4. This is not the sacrifice, black is taking advantage of the pin, and so he simply wants to win the pawn using that pin. White took the pawn on f4, knight takes f4, and black continued knight to e3, this time putting more pressure on the white's light-scored bishop, and of course the knight from d4 is still under the attack, therefore white moved it back to e2, but black simply took the bishop because it lets them capture the pawn on the next move with bishop takes f3 with a double attack on the white's knights. And now in the following moves there is no way for white to prevent black's two passed pawns to simply moving forward and being promoted later on. Within a few moves Dominguez resigned. If you wish to check the entire game, you can follow the link below the video and download the entire game with a few extra comments. And meanwhile, I just would like to highlight once again very quickly the key takeaways from this game, which are the common patterns for the Sicilian defense. Especially if you play it as black, that's going to be extremely helpful. Let me come back to one of the critical positions from the opening so that we can just quickly summarize the three typical patterns in the Sicilian defense. The first one being the strong knight on e5. If you can fix your knight on e5, possibly with the help of the pawn advancement to g5, which secures the knight there so that white cannot push the knight away by playing pawn to f4. If you can do this, this knight from e5 will dominate over the position, will prevent white from playing any aggressive advancements, and therefore you will be free to do whatever maneuvers you want to follow. So that's the first takeaway. Now let's go with the following few moves. We have already seen them, of course, so I will not discuss them too much. This is just to quickly summarize so that you can better remember them. The next thing is the advanced fianchetto on the queen side, which Kasparov played at this point of the game, which again is multifunctional move, helps your potential attack on the queen side, helps you to place your bishop actively on the b7, controlling the long diagonal, and also it provides the additional c4 square for your knight or maybe even rook in the future. So that is the second common idea, advanced fianchetto on the queen side. It is almost always a good idea. And finally, playing rook to c8. This is such a standard move in the Sicilian defense that that people somewhat underestimate its value. If you can bring your heavy piece in the game, your rook, this can help you a lot, and therefore you should never miss a chance to do that if you're playing Sicilian defense. This is one of the main ideas behind the Sicilian defense, by the way, to have this c-file for the rook. And therefore, if you can play the rook there, which will play a very active role in the middle game, that's great for you. So that was the third common idea. Of course, Kasparov played many other things in this game, many other good ideas, but let me just highlight these three. So the advanced fianchetto on the queen side, the strong knight on e5, and the rook on c8. These are very common plans. If you follow them, even in the blitz game like Kasparov, you can find the right moves easily and win a lot of the games. I wish you best of luck in your upcoming chess battles. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so that you will be notified when new videos are published, and of course hit like for the video, and I'll talk to you in the next videos. Cheers!